How do you solve a problem like North Korea? That's the dilemma facing US President Donald Trump.
We must also confront the threat from North Korea, and that's what it is. It's a threat. We're also talking, obviously, about North Korea and the problem and menace of North Korea.
Trump has also turned reining in Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program into one of the most critical issues in the US relationship with China.
I appreciate the things that you have done relative to the very substantial problem that we all face in North Korea, a problem that something has to be done about.
The US approach so far has focused on increasing economic sanctions and centering Pyongyang diplomatically. But the North Korean leader Kim Jong Un's response to that war of words has been a show of force. This month's successful test of an intercontinental ballistic missile was heralded in North Korea as a great demonstration of the nation's power and its ability to defend itself. Despite decades of sanctions meant to prevent this kind of test, the regime has shown its ability to work around such barriers. Some experts believe it's now capable of launching a missile which could strike the US mainland. Pyongyang says this type of weapon is also capable of carrying a large and heavy nuclear warhead. Trump is not the first US president to try to limit North Korea's nuclear capabilities, but he has made it a centerpiece of his US foreign policy. And American forces have been quick to respond to Pyongyang's displays of military might with their own. Last week, the US sent 2 supersonic bombers from Guam to take part in a drill with South Korean forces. The mission of their simulation: destroying an enemy's ballistic missile launcher. Now that Pyongyang has shown it could potentially hit US soil, questions are being asked about whether the US needs to take a more active strategy.
Do we need to shoot down their next missile? What's the next move?
You know, I trust our military. I trust this president for letting the military do their job. They're not going to advertise what they're going to do beforehand. But, Pete, this is an existential threat to this nation.
Donald Trump says there will eventually be success on the North Korean issue. He hasn't defined what success will look like, but he also hasn't ruled out taking direct military action. So should that be an option worth considering? Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by U.S. syndicated radio host John Cardillo in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and from Beijing, Chinese affairs analyst Einar Tangen. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. John Cardillo, let me begin with you. Is North Korea a rational actor?
No, not at all. They're not a rational actor whatsoever. I think that's evident in Kim's daily behavior. And that's the limited information that comes out of North Korea. I mean, think about it. They tightly censor what comes out of that nation in terms of media, and he still comes off looking like a world-class lunatic. And so I think he's anything but a rational actor. I think he's quite irrational and needs to be deposed as quickly as possible.
Einar Tangen, is North Korea a rational actor?
Well, some people say that he is, and that he's similar to Donald Trump, and that he likes to create a lot of commotion, create confrontation, and things like that. So you have 2 very similar people in the sense of their styles who are going at it. Unfortunately, from the U.S. side, yes, we do not see him as rational because of his desire to have a nuclear-armed ICBM pointed at the U.S. while he's spewing vitriolic anti-American sayings.
John Cardillo, how would you have him deposed without risking military confrontation, without risking nuclear annihilation?
Let me first make let me just counter my colleague's point. He's nothing like Donald Trump, because Donald Trump, the American president, doesn't starve his own people and murder his senior staff. It's a ridiculous comparison. They're nothing alike. Trump isn't a homicidal maniac. But that being said, I don't think there's a way to depose this guy without killing him, quite frankly. It's as simple as that. I think there's going to have to be military action or some kind of intelligence operation, at least, to remove him. to exterminate him. Use whatever term you'd like to use. I think that China has to be a partner in this for the simple reason that the United States has very little, if any, effective human intelligence on the ground in North Korea. So we're going to rely. We need China's help in this, but I don't know if China really wants a unified Korea on their southern border.
Okay, I'm glad you both brought up Trump and China, because there's a tweet for everything, of course, in this presidency. Trump tweeted, trade between China and North Korea grew almost 40% in the first quarter. So much for China working with us, but we had to give it a try. There's the text of the tweet on your screen. Einar Tangen, is that unfair on the Chinese?
No, it's neither fair nor unfair. It reflects the reality. From the Chinese perspective, they're trying to create a non-lethal trade with North Korea to show them that there is an alternative. What we have right now is, at best, a slow-motion train wreck. The U.S. will not let a nuclear-armed ICBM be pointed at the U.S., and North Korea will not give up its nuclear program unless it gets absolute assurances of its safety. So at this point, neither is able to come to resolution. China and now South Korea are in between. It is going to be a situation which impacts them more than the U.S. if there is, in fact, some operation to try to remove Kim or start a military attack. Remember, 1/4 of South Korea's population is within range of artillery. This has nothing to do with nuclear weapons. This is a barrage that could take out millions of people. And sitting in the U.S., it is sometimes very easy to say that that is the price of our protection. But I'm sure the South Koreans would disagree.
Yep.
For China's perspective, they would be looking at a horde of refugees streaming across the border in the ensuing mayhem that would arise as different factions fought for control.
Sure, isn't that a bit of a cop-out? And I've been hearing this for years, that the Chinese don't want a string of refugees across the border. That's why they're willing to prop up the North Koreans for as long as possible. Is it worth maintaining this totalitarian dictatorship next door just because you don't want refugees across the border?
Well, that's a fairly loaded question. You're saying that China is propping them up. But the issue is, if they withdraw all support, what would you have? You'd have a complete breakdown in that particular society.
They're propping up the survival of the Kim dynasty.
Trade is... Well, the survival of the Kim dynasty is there. We cannot change that. They are sitting in the seat of power. As we have seen in other places where we thought it would be very, very easy to come in and transition the governments in Iraq, it does not work out the way that you plan. And the people who get killed are not necessarily Americans to begin with, unless they go in directly, but it's the civilian populations who pay the price.
Okay.
So it's very easy to sit when you're not involved directly and say, look, this is just something we should do for the safety of ourselves.
Okay, so let's ask John Cardillo. John, you're in Fort Lauderdale. You're not within the range of North Korean missiles, whether nuclear or not. It's very easy to be hawkish over there. But the Chinese, they have to live in the neighborhood. The South Koreans have to be in the same neighborhood as well. Isn't it easy for you to be a hawk while the rest of them have to deal with the consequences?
Well, look, I don't ever make these statements lightly. I have plenty of friends serving in the military. I was with the NYPD. I lost friends on 9/11. So I understand the price of attacks and war. But this is not analogous to Iraq. In Iraq, you had Islamofascist insurgencies who wanted to fill the vacuum created when we toppled Saddam Hussein. You don't have that in North Korea. The people in North Korea are oppressed. They are being murdered. They are being starved. They want this maniac gone. And we can't let despots, we cannot let homicidal maniac despots rule and threaten the world with nuclear weapons because they might strike a city in South Korea. Now, that being said, again, our intelligence assets, both signals and human intelligence, are very limited. So we have to be very careful about what we do. But I do think that inevitably a surgical strike to kill Kim and an intelligence operation to replace him with somebody more rational and more pro-global trade, who's not going to want to arm themselves with nuclear weapons and threaten all their neighbors in the international community, that's going to have to happen. Again, that's inevitable, because this guy cannot continue to sit there in his little pocket of the world between China, between Korea, and threaten everyone. But I do agree that China does not want the refugees. China also doesn't want an expanded South Korea economic base They rely on their factories that pump out U.S. goods. They don't want our relationship on that front with South Korea to grow when a unified Korea becomes more productive and more of an industrialized society. So I understand China's problem, but we're at a point now where we've got to put some pressure on them economically and say, hey, we can move those factories to South Korea tomorrow if you're not going to assist us in removing this guy. I think the time is long past for soft diplomacy with North Korea.
Okay, so Einar Tangen, this is not just John Cardillo's view, but it's a view that seems to be prevalent and gaining more ground in the U.S. right now. It's not nuclear war with the North Koreans. It's not attacking them. It's just assassinating Kim Jong Un, and everything will sort of turn out okay. How do you see that, Einar?
Well, if it was that simple, I think it would have been done quite a while ago. I mean, this is not a situation where you just dance in and know where he is. He uses body doubles. He is prepared for this. He's quite aware that a decapitation strike is one of the options that's on there. If you think he's not prepared for this, I think you're highly deluded. Once again, wrapping yourself in the flag does not, and making allusions to 9/11 does nothing to do with the current crisis in hand. The people who are going to suffer, and there's no ambiguity about the 6,000 plus artillery pieces pointed at Seoul, where in the greater Seoul area, there, as I said, 1/4 of the entire population of South Korea. As to your illusions that somehow China is trying to prevent a unified Korean peninsula because it would be to their benefit, do you think really that they're very pleased that every time Xi Jinping gets near a microphone, wants to make a major policy speech, Kim Jong Un sees it fit to fire off another one of his missiles as a show of contempt for Beijing? I think it's very, very strange that there's this prevalent view within the U.S. that Beijing is somehow happy with the situation in North Korea. They would like nothing better than to have trade. Remember, they are the ones who are pushing the Belt and Road Initiative, trying to keep globalization alive. It is Donald Trump who is on the other end of that equation, who says, no, America first. It's resulted in us being isolated, as is shown in the G20, and this kind of behavior and simplistic thinking is the kind of problem that everybody can buy into, but will result in greater calamity thereafter.
Okay, gentlemen, unfortunately, we've run out of time. But I'd love to have both of you on the program again in the future. Thanks so much for joining us, John Cardillo and Einar Tangen.